Hey everyone, before we start this very first episode of Platforms, I want to give a very special shout out this week to the Freedom Community Clinic in Oakland, California. Their mission is to provide direct whole person care to communities across the Bay Area. They do so through holistic health programs and workshops, community pop-up clinics, and patient advocacy to under-resourced and underestimated communities throughout the Bay Area. At a time when healthcare is not a commodity for everyone, and we're seeing enormous spikes in the coronavirus, especially in underserved communities, I think we need people like the ones behind the Freedom Community Clinic now more than ever. If you would like to make a donation or even just want to learn more about them, please click the link in the description. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Platforms, where we come together whilst apart. I, of course, am your host, James Paul Gregory, and I am very excited to be bringing you this very first episode of Platforms. Part of the reason I wanted to do this show is because I do consider myself an artist, and as such, wanted to give a place, or a platform, if you would, for artists, activists, social justice advocates, mental health advocates, anyone who wants to have their voice heard, talk about a project they're working on, talk about an issue they feel strongly about, or even bring light to issues that aren't in the media so much. Now, as you can probably tell by my unruly facial hair, the bland white background behind me, and the fact that I'm not wearing any shoes under here, yes, it is true, we are still in the midst of a global pandemic. And when I told my producers that I wanted to do an interview show with the utmost legitimacy and top quality production value, they said to me, "Put a suit on, hope you have Zoom Premium." All joking aside, I am very, very excited to be doing this. This is something I've wanted to do for a really long time. These are two things I feel very passionate about, arts and activism, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way. All that being said, let's get to our first guest. Now, my very first guest is a near dear friend of mine. He is a writer, director, producer, theater artist, actor, activist, and he is just one of the most outspoken, intuitive, and creative people I have ever met. He is the artistic and editorial director of The Forum, which is an arts collective here in the Bay Area. He has worked with such theater companies as the Greenhouse Theater Festival and Golden Thread Productions in San Francisco, and has directed such plays as Gruesome Playground Injuries by Rajiv Joseph and No Exit by Jean Paul Sartre. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my friend, Julius Rea.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good, thank you so much.
Last year, I saw the play that you wrote, Ser Raphael, which was directed by Kieran Beckia. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Kieran Beckia.
Yeah, which was a really, really powerful play about sexual assault that was done as a part of your artistic collective, The Forum.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your work with The Forum, how that all came to be, and what your artistic goals have been since your work with them first started?
Yeah, the Forum Collective is, obviously it's a collective, it's an arts collective. It focuses primarily on performance art, but actually our philosophy behind art making is blending performance art or live performance, journalism, and traditionally gallery curation as like a multidisciplinary method to explore topics, events, and trends that are current and highly relevant to our population or to our community. Two of the founding members and myself made a gallery show called Potential, and I was with Jesse Sutterly and Catherine Hada, and that was housed at the Flight Deck in Oakland, and that was a few years ago. And we um, had this idea to talk about, uh, gosh, it wasn't necessarily a show about trauma, but it was really about asking parents how they talk to their children when their children had, a minority status placed on them. And it was primarily focused on gender and race. But the end result of that show, it became like a multi-sensory experience
Mm-hmm.
because we had interviewed folks, families specifically, or primarily families with like young children, and then one family that was like a single mom and a single child, and he was about to go off to college. So we had interviewed them and typed up those interviews, but then we had also taken like pictures of them and like blown them up huge across this gallery, like across the entire wall. And then we also invited the participants to answer the same questions that we had asked of the interviewees, and we had them post them around the gallery. And then on top of that, we invited some people to basically talk about some of those same questions, but like live in front of the audience or in front of the people the patrons who came. So after that, the three of us, we realized that we could really use journalism, live performance, and gallery curation kind of like very much integrated into one whole experience, which other people had done, but because the three of us were so journalism minded, we didn't realize that we could like really explore a topic journalistically like that. Yeah.
Okay.
And I wrote a play, Sir Raphael. I knew that I wanted to get it produced because um, I worked with a dramaturg um, who really strongly suggested that I get it produced, and she connected me with Kieran Becchia, who became the director and the co-producer, and um, and then we just kind of went off running.
Wow.
So there was one production of it that was in the December of 2018, and then there was another production of it that was in 2019. So during the first production, when Kieran came along, and then also I had an artistic collaborator, Ryan Takamiya, come in, and at the time he was working with just audience engagement and just kind of helping some stuff out. But when the five of us got together, we were like, this kind of seems like an actual company
Mm-hmm.
with an actual philosophic principle. And
And you were a philosophy major at State, right?
yeah, I got a philosophy degree at San Francisco State, because my mom really pushed me to get a degree, but I was like, I'm gonna get it on my terms. So then I got, job-wise, the most historically impractical degree to get, but then like personal.
I mean, you're also talking to somebody with a theater degree, so.
Exactly. So we both have BAs in alcoholism and bad choices. So,
Exactly.
um, but when it kind of came to um, that that moment,
Mm-hmm.
we just realized that we could really create something, and then the form was created. Um, During the creation of it and kind of the very little life that it has had, we it's grown and evolved, and I'm like the artistic director and the editorial director.
Yeah, and I did want to ask you about that. So you're the artistic director and the editorial director.
Mhm.
Now the editorial director, are you mostly like kind of you have like the same position, as an editor at like a newspaper, any big magazine, in that you served, as the editor for the journalistic aspect and also maybe for the curation aspect of the forum?
Of our current collaborators on we call it an artistic board, have strong performance and producing backgrounds, but not necessarily like a journalism and a gallery curation background as I kind of do.
Hmm.
So even though I'm the artistic director, I kind of hold the philosophy of the company. But I also focus on the development of in-house newer projects. And also I focus on any editorial content, whether it be like written or it's content that gives work new, like more context, obviously, and any type of gallery curation in that process, which further gives the live performance or whatever performance aspect usually more um, context inside of our current like political sphere or our socioeconomic moment or anything like that. But at the same time, it's very shared governance. So even though I'm the artistic director and traditionally the artistic director is like the one in charge, we
Hmm.
do everything by vote, and we like have sometimes our projects are like extended out for a little bit of time because we're really trying to make sure that everyone is on the same page, and we're trying to make sure that everyone understands what we're all doing and that everyone has a say in voicing their own opinions and really trying to figure out like, is this the best idea? And if it is, then we all have to agree upon it. And if not, we can either revise it or go on to the next piece. So it's really, at least for my role, it's mostly those two things, just job wise.
Hmm.
But I think it's like when more people come into the fold of the forum, I'm the one who's trying to like teach the philosophy of it, which is very much like a multidisciplinary approach to creating art,
Hmm.
but then also a shared governance um, aspect of making decisions on the art. So it's kind of this twofold process, and then we have the forum. We we were in the um, the 2020 Queer Arts Festival,
Hmm.
but of course it was postponed. And we were also in the 2020 Fury Factory Festival, which is going to be postponed to the fall,
Hmm.
and then of this year. And then we're also a part of the 2020 Incubator, the Playground SF Innovator Incubator
Hmm.
cohort that for 2020 we're a part of. So in November, December, we'll basically get a live on Zoom showing of a new piece that we're working on
Wow.
after we've been getting basically professional development over the course of this year.
Yeah. I want to ask you about Sarah Raphael a little bit, because you had mentioned that you kind of dole out these projects to kind of get the impact across. And Sarah Raphael, that was done in spring of last year, and then also was it also fall the previous year?
Yeah, it was in December of 2018, and then spring, I think March of
Yeah.
2019. And then those two projects became the catalyst for the company that we have today.
When I went to go see Gruesome Playground Injuries, something I noticed with that show was that it was really, I mean, obviously, uh the flight deck is very immersive space, and
Mhm.
you really kind of went above and beyond with that by kind of having the audience gather around the action of the two actors. And is that something that you try to carry over into your work at the forum?
Yeah, I don't know why I'm being hesitant about that. Yes. like we specifically create and choose projects to start a discussion.
Yeah.
And of course, like that's what all art is supposed to do, but like we try to deliver it on because of the approach, especially the multidisciplinary approach of like creating the work and contextualizing it.
Hmm.
We try to give as much not leeway, but like we try to provide many points of entry
Hmm.
into whatever topic we're discussing.
Right.
And then also because so much of our work is like journalism based and therefore like community based,
Hmm.
a lot of it is like we're interviewing the people, we're doing like heavy research on the topics that we're like trying to cover. So it's always like, even though in the theatrical context, you know, having something in having the audience like surround the play space, whether it be like theater in the round or like a three-fourths like do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Shift or whatever the term is
Like a
that I
thrust.
express. Thank you. Um, it doesn't necessarily have to be like every show is going to be like this, but whichever way we can really like understand the the ideas at hand a little bit deeper,
Hmm.
that's kind of necessary. With
Yeah.
gruesome playground injuries, because that was like my own personal work and it wasn't necessarily to the forum, I just love that it's like you like in a theater in the round situation because it's different at any single angle that you see it. I think that mirrors kind of what we're trying to get at with the forum is that inside of a larger discussion or topic or show, there's multiple ways to view it, and there's
Hmm.
multiple ways to interact with it, and then inherently, the conversation around the work or the topic or the event or the trend always has to take into account that like everybody has seen that essential thing completely different. So I think that it's not necessarily, you know, the same emphasis or pushed into the work of the forum, like structurally, like how one performance is structured, but I think it's mirrored in the forum's actions because that's how we approach the art making, and that's also the end goal for us is to like stimulate the conversation and give people multiple entry points and to really do the community building work side of it to include many people into this conversation. So it's all a vessel for that end, that shared end product that
Hmm.
I think is a similar thing that happens when we talk about doing theater in the round.
It's clear that there are so many different layers that go into this. Is that something that, you discuss at all your meetings with all your board members?
Yeah, um, we discuss it a lot. We have a lot of discussions. Sometimes, like obviously, we'll have like a whole scheduled meeting, and then we realize that the meeting has gone off the rails because we tried to keep to a few topics, and then like even this past week we were just so like itinerant with like what we were doing. We are like, this is accomplished and we need to get this done, and then we realized that it's like, oh, we finally finished the meeting on time, all of the work was done. Then we just started to like talk about another new idea for a project. And then that conversation went on for like another 30 or 40 minutes. And then even the discussion of that first thing, that first nugget or kernel of a new project is kind of like the base usually. So there's always a lot of discussions, and the people who are part of the forum right now are like very highly smart, highly, just super intelligent,
Right.
super God, like emotionally intelligent too.
Hmm.
So like our current board, recruited Lee Rondon Davis and Marisa Ramos. Um, and there are new board members. And I think it's weird because even when I say board members, traditionally in a theater structure, it's like there's the AD and then the production team, and then above it is kind of like this board that controls everything.
Hmm.
But we're kind of the artistic board that controls everything because it's all shared.
Right.
So yeah, it's always like super deep, the conversations, and it's always like checking in with others and just being like, okay, so if we do that, what kind of chain reaction does that bring up? Or like if we do that, does that mean that we're like not focusing on this other aspect? Or is it okay to just focus on this one? And is that the story, or is that the issue that we're trying to give voice to the most? And there are so many layers, but I think that, you know, when we get down to it, it's always in service of like, what is the final idea?
Hmm.
What's the best way to present it? And are we informed enough about it before we start doing the work? I think that that's the other thing, is like introducing the journalism aspect of it means that we have to inform ourselves and kind of at least attempt to make ourselves be experts on it as best as we can.
Obviously, the world has gone through a lot of unprecedented change with the COVID-19 pandemic and obviously the recent Black Lives Matter protests. As we're still in the midst of all of that, have your goals changed at all? And if so, how do you plan on going forward with all of that?
Our goals have not necessarily changed, but they were fine. I think that our main goal was always to like create the best work possible and have it be like really community oriented and, you know, be informed when we make decisions.
Hmm.
But I think that it's just more focused on like even more intentionality with the work. And it's like when we become intentional with the work, that we have to be informed more about the work. And I think that that's kind of the whole thing that we're seeing, like in all aspects of the world right now, is that we're seeing like a calling for more intentionality around our words and our actions. And if there's more intentionality, that means that we have to be more informed about everything. Um, and so like we put out individual solidarity statements, like all of the board members, they basically put out their own
Yeah,
sol-
I saw those. Yeah.
yeah, instead of a shared one, which a lot of companies are doing, or like a unified where it's like this is a press release or something like that. So for us it's different because each one of our values, like all of our values are shared, but the ways that we go about it are different. So it's like how me and Lee, who are both like black and queer, but I'm a cis man, and Lee is a non-binary femme, like non-binary and femme,
Hmm.
and black. So like their perspective, and on top of that, not just their body, but like their personal history is like they're very they're a big pillar inside of the theater community inside of the Bay Area. They work at like a bunch of different places. They're like on 1,000,003 committees, and they're really like a champion for like so many people and so many stories and so many black artists. Their statement is different from even mine because I come from a world of like understanding, like trying to figure out like what the best mode of communication is and what the best mode of theater is and what the best mode of like translating these stories and all these things. Where like if you turn to like Marisa, for example, like her statement focused a lot on like the uncomfortability around having these conversations and like making these actions. And she like has that great statement in it where she's just like, if you feel uncomfortable, then that means good. Like, and that means you're probably doing something right.
Hmm.
So I think that I hope that's answering the question appropriately, because it's like when I look at the work that we're trying to do and the way that we're going about it, it hasn't changed much. It's just become more serious and more intentional.
So recently, documents were created detailing the experiences of POC actors in theater in various regions across the US, including, of course, the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Um, have you had a chance to see any of those statements and testimonies? And if so, was there anything that surprised you? Anything that stood out?
Yes, I've been very involved in it. Um, Eli Arqueza, who created the document originally and who kind of holds that space most of the time, is a dear friend
Mhm.
and a collaborator. And we had talked about it multiple times, on top of like him talking about it with everybody else. Um, I moderated a Theater Bay Area hosted discussion on the healing. It was called Healing Through Zoom, and it was focused on the living documents. And that was this Tuesday, July 21st.
Whatever
Um,
days are.
yeah, whatever days are. Um, so I've read the document. I've talked to people who have shared their own experiences in the document. Um, I think that what stood out with me is that there were so many instances where it was like a multiple year pattern. I think that, you know, sometimes it was like, oh yeah, there was this one incident here or this one thing that kind of was bothersome there. And then we have, serious instances and events of like misconduct and abuse and violence. And I think that that is what is most shocking, if that's the question to me, is that, and we talked about this inside of the town hall
Mhm.
meeting, with hosted by TVA. Like I brought it up in like the panel discussion that I like moderated. I brought up that I'm just like, well, it's not ironic because that term doesn't like mean anything in this case, but it's interesting
Mhm.
that we have this art form that is supposed to be about empathic communication, and it's supposed to be understanding folks, and it's supposed to like flex that muscle and really like teach us how to like listen to other people and like listen to our intentions and like where they come from and dive into that and analyze our emotional state. That's what like theater makers do. And there were so many instances of it where, theater was on top of any structure ever created, any system, any industry is like, whoa, it's still guided by like capitalism, and it's still guided by racism and sexism and ableism and, really nasty power dynamics and anti-blackness. So it's just like, it's not foolish, I would say, to think that like theater could save us, because sometimes we have like that idea. I don't think that necessarily theater is like supposed to save us,
Mhm.
but I think that it has this like great potential to like help and heal us, like in a really cathartic, therapeutic way that we all understand the power of that. But then it's like when we go to it and then people still get hurt,
Mhm.
and the capital structures of theater
Yeah.
just are designed to manipulate and hurt people, and then also like protect like those in power, obviously, and not have like an accountable. like a way of accountability, like because everybody like makes mistakes, sure, but there's no way to hold everybody accountability, especially people who like are companies that it's like this was happening for years and years and years and years. It's not just like one incident
Right.
or one event. It's like, oh no, this is a culture, just like everywhere else. So
Yeah.
I think that the most shocking thing is just like that weird thing in all art forms, that it's like, oh yeah, trauma and abuse and violence can totally happen inside of a space that is designed to be anti trauma, abuse, and violence. So nothing in there was like, oh, I'm surprised that this happened. But the depths of it are very painful to read. And just the fact that it feels like this amount of violence runs counter towards our entire like basic philosophy of art making.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the most like quote unquote shocking or upsetting or whatever thing. But then when you go into it, it's just like, yep, that like that AD has
Yeah.
done that multiple times, and multiple people are saying the same thing. And like, oh, this company has, consistently, you know, consistently used people and like used black and brown bodies, and it's gone, you know, unsaid in a public forum. And so when I'm just reading the document, I think that it's a lot for everybody, and it's a lot for people who like haven't been inside of the theater realm for so long and have tried to have these discussions before and have been silenced.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's another thing that's just great about it, even though it's very hurtful and harmful and re-triggering for people to just like have the trauma out there. But it sometimes feels like it's like the main way, especially for like companies and structures and businesses, to really be held accountable for their actions publicly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and see, like I put this all because they're all companies. Like it's not in the document. There are like the only individual names of people are theater critics, and it's like those people are critiqued or those people are spoken about with their one-on-one stuff, but they're also like journalists and they're critics. So like we're not talk it's not like there's one theater artist's name inside of the document and then people are just piling on top of that person. No, it's a company. It's a company who is held responsible. It was a company who hired these people and continued this process. So I think that that it's just, yeah, and it's just upsetting because it's just like, man, there's like really no safe place from it. And if there's no safe place from like all of the isms and all the attacks, then it's like, okay, then we have to kind of create a safe place, whatever that word means, um, whatever that word safe means. So, yes.
I asked you this a couple months back, but obviously so much has happened since, so I wanted to ask you it again. How do you see theater and even just the arts overall changing after all of this?
Ooh,
I know that's a really loaded question because I know
I
everyone's been asked it, and again, I've asked you already, but
I don't know fully. Well, the first answer is like I don't know. The thing that I see happening, the thing that okay, there's a practical thing and then there's the thing that I want. The practical thing is that, power will shift, like the structures will get revised, or the structures that aren't working will be dismantled and replaced with new structures. Like that's practically what's going to happen. But it's going to change a lot. So like the companies that we see now are not going to be the companies that we see like a year from now or 2 years from now. And it's not just going to be like, well, theater companies fold all the time. It's like, no, there's going to be a drastic shift. And there's going to be a lot of closings or shiftings. And our idea of what theater is going to change because of those structures. Like we're not going to see, especially like for theater students, like people who are like trying to get a degree and become working theater artists, which I wasn't. So I have to preface that. But I think that there's always this thing with any type of degree. If you get a degree, that means that the people that you're learning from are trying to train you to get a job inside of the world that is current. But we don't know what this world looks like now. So I'm not saying like don't get a degree in theater, because people should totally study what they want and like explore the art form that they want. But theater isn't painting. It's not, it's not digital media. It's not fine arts. It's live performance, and it's reflective. It's a narrative reflection of our world, and it's also so based in like interpersonal communication and interpersonal relationships, more so than other art forms. So I think that because the nature of interpersonal communication and interpersonal relationships are changing, our whole art form is changing. So it's like changing on like an interpersonal level, it's changing on a structural level, it's changing on a financial level. So all of it is just gonna be replaced with something new. Which is a very honestly like capitalism based idea, is that this traditional way of theater was not working, so therefore it needs to be dismantled or destroyed or replaced with a new revised better idea, and that better idea will quote unquote win, whatever that means. I think that personally I like it when we talk about theater as purely a therapeutic practice. I think that for me, I found the most joy when theater is heavily tied to therapy, and it's heavily tied to holding space. And not just like holding space where it's like, we're going to put on a whole show and then the audience that comes shares inside of the space. That is completely magical and a different thing. But I think that even in realms of like drama therapy, which is so that therapy is like so like coded white, because it's like theater and therapy, like the two whitest forms of communication. But at the same time, when I've personally experienced like using theater practice to hold space for others in like an actual therapeutic way, and not like a roundabout therapeutic way that all theater does naturally, like the art of convening together like helps us spiritually heal, further than that, where it's like, no, we're actually going to use theater practice to like actually listen to each other and hold space for each other. I think that that is kind of what I long for more, is that there is just an emphasis and an understanding that the goal of all of this is to heal somebody. And just that's it. Even the practice of like listening to one another, like, how we're trained to like listen to each other, because we have to like, if we're acting in a scene with somebody, we have to like listen to them. Even something as that, simple as that, it's like, okay, yeah, that's therapeutic. So I hope for that, but at the same time, what will probably happen is what's happening right now.
Mhm.
Like we're seeing companies drastically change. We're seeing companies like potentially fold. We're seeing companies change their season, dismantle their season, change their names, change their leadership. So like that's actually what we're seeing, and we're just seeing like the beginnings of it. But I think that on the opposite side of it is that that's indicative of creating like a whole new world and a whole new system that no one has has an understanding of what that looks like necessarily because it hasn't been the norm.
Right.
And same thing, it's like people have been doing like anti-racist theater for years, and it's like not a new thing. But
Mhm.
at the same time, because anti-racism theater or anti-blankism theater is not the theater that gets taught in
Right.
school. That's why I have to go back to like the theater, the students of theater,
Mhm.
or people getting degrees or exploring theater like that. Unless their teachers are prepped to really understand what art can do when it dismantles structures and systems, then there's going to be like a further cognitive dissonance, inside of the art form. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's. I know that it will be different, but I don't know what it's going to look like necessarily.
I mean, to be honest with you, in my own work in theater, the part of the main reason I wanted to become an actor is because it has always been therapeutic for me, and it is a means of me kind of being able to express myself or express emotions in a
Mm-hmm.
way that I can't do so in real life. So I really appreciate that you put such a heavy aspect on that, or such a heavy emphasis on that aspect of it.
Yeah, and thank you. But I think that, and that's the other thing, because like when people like learn how to be theater artists or just like get a taste of it, like
Mhm.
what that really feels like to like be on stage and you're like diving into a character, and the aspect of diving into a character gives you the tools to dive into yourself. And then like when you stand proudly like on that stage, if you're an actor or whatever, you are being a part of a process of like showcasing a truth,
Mhm.
like a true vulnerability or a true way of thinking, just somebody's truth you're like being a part of. And then, but then it's like, okay, cool. So you know how to do that for yourself. So now let's see you try to do that for like your friend or your family member or someone on the street or someone you live with, or an acquaintance, where it's like, okay, I know how to listen to people, like especially performers, writers, and directors. It's like I know how to listen to people. I know what catharsis looks like. I know what empathetic communication is supposed to look like, and I understand what happens when people are running into their own barriers for their own growth,
Mhm.
because that's the basis of all theatrical narrative conflict. Is like you have an issue and you are going to thrash your way through your issue until you get better, hopefully, on the other side. So it's like we understand literally the narrative aspect and the narrative journey of healing, um, inherently. So like why don't it's just it's not shocking to me, but it's just like it's funny because like when I say that, some theater artists are like, oh yeah, but of course everything we do is therapy. But I'm like, no, but do you actually get that it's like that's actually just therapy? Like you don't have to necessarily like put on a freaking like $500,000 show to like use those tools in your everyday life to like help people. Like, is it fantastic? Yes. Is this like a once in a lifetime piece that you've created on the stage? Of course. But that doesn't replace just like talking to somebody and reflecting back to them what they have shared with you. And like those tenets of theater is just like it's happening more and more in our conversations and hopefully in our actions. But like that, I always just kind of go back to that it's like, well, it should be helping somebody. Like
Yeah.
writers can help themselves because they have the ability to like write. and directors can help themselves because they have the ability to like analyze and synthesize these stories of conflict,
Mm-hmm.
and performers get a chance to like stand in their truth and also like to make people feel better. It's like, when you're like laughing with somebody on stage, it's like that's healing, but it's like all part of this healing process. So yeah, it always comes back to that idea that it's like this is supposed to be helping someone
Right.
right now, actively, not 3 months from now, not after the checks have cleared. It's supposed to be happening. The healing is supposed to be like
Right.
building on itself in the moment.
Taking it back a little bit, so you went into SFSU as a philosophy major. When did theater and, well, really just art in general, when did that really come into your life, and when did you realize that it could have therapeutic benefits?
Uh, I mean, it's always been there because I was always, ever since middle school, I was writing, but like in middle school and high school, I was doing poetry and journalism. I started journalism in high school, or whatever that was in high school. And then a few of my friends and oh, I forgot to name somebody. I'll name them at the end.
Okay.
Remind me, bring
Okay.
up the importance of dramaturgy later with Rowena Mackay, Mackay, who is that original dramaturg, who I should actually probably thank for being the initial catalyst for the forum, like fully coming together. But we'll come back to her. It's a few of my friends were filmmakers. So they suggested that I do film I wrote. And I was like, yeah, I would love that. And I started to make like a few short films here and there, and I really wanted to dive into that. Um, but the people that I could get to be in the films for like free were theater actors, and they were theater students. So when I started doing that, and when I went to SF State for philosophy, and I thought I was going to get like a minor in film, um, an actor that I worked with, Taylor Petracek, said, "Hey, you should come and do theater stuff over here. You would really like it. We need more directors. We definitely need more writers. Like, just come over and there's a few things that you can do." And then I said, okay. And I did like a 48-hour play festival, and I obviously didn't know anybody at all. So but I wrote a piece and I directed it. It was like one of those things where I realized the day of that it was like the one serious piece in everything. And then also that 48-hour play festival for the theater students were just like a time to like play and be really silly and do things that you would never do in the classroom. And then because I was a philosophy person or a philosophy major coming in, I was just like, okay, I really want to talk about this and I really want to tell this story. And it's like kind of serious. And then that led to one thing, and then like at an after party, like somebody was like, yeah, you should like go talk to the playwriting teachers. And then I talked to the playwriting teacher, Roy Convoy, and he was like, yeah, I have a class that you can take actually that's for like all majors. And I was like, really? And at the same time, honestly, I just tried to do the same work twice. So I knew that I wanted to do that. And I knew I was like, I'm pretty much gonna like write a play in this class, even though he was like, don't push yourself to write a play. I was like, I'm gonna write a play. He's like, don't. And I was like, I'm gonna do it. He's like, oh, it's your choice. So then I talked to my professor, Kurt Nutting, who was a philosophy professor. and I said, hey, basically, I want to write a play, but I want to write it like I'm writing a philosophy paper. And he's like, do it, do it. And I was like, great. So I did an independent study for him. So while I was like writing this play in like Roy's class, I was analyzing it like it was a philosophy piece, like it was a thesis. And then when I realized that it was all kind of playing in the same realm, it was all trying to like get to, it was always trying to like share knowledge and like understanding, and then kind of like everything fell into place, and then like a whole bunch of different experiences which you can go into later. um you know it started from a place of exploration, and then just turned into like a place of saying like, okay, that what I'm really interested in is like communication and people trying to understand one another, and like what's the best way that we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the therapy aspect came along aside of that, because I was just like, okay, so if we are trying to understand each other, then I guess we're just trying to communicate better. And understanding and communication is like, especially now, 2020 Julius is like, yes, this is the basis of all therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like just trying to like listen and validate each other. And yeah, and then I should also say like that first play that I did for SO State, I think it was called like 180 or 160. 160, 140, something. It was one. No, it was 140.
Okay.
140. And it was with uh, Jamie, Balista, and Popple Hamlin,
Oh,
and I had them.
you're just dropping all the names right now. I mean, Roy Conboy, Jamie,
Like, I'm
Pablo.
trying to like really pinpoint that I'm just like, I do know everyone's names, even though like I have such a bad time with names.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but and then they like did this beautiful piece about, two people who dated when they were younger and then called each other and their lives were just different, and then they just kind of like thought, they just like had a moment of like remembering what they had, even though it was what they had now was completely different and super separated. And it was like funny and kind of sad, and and I directed them, and it like got deep, and it was like cool, and I was like, yeah, like this is cool, like I can like write and direct, and like we can all be like emotionally vulnerable and like hold each other, like yes, like that's cool. And I think that that's the thing of it. It's just like, okay, we can like just actually be here for one another. We can actually just be here for one another. But it sucks because like, sometimes like when you write like a whole play or you do a whole piece, and then you're just like at the end of it, all you needed to say was like I had a rough time growing up. Like, like it would have been so easy just to verbalize, quote unquote, I had a rough time growing up, instead of like writing like a whole piece and putting on a whole production where you have like brought all these people to like play this like, destructive, trauma-filled family, as I have done in the past, where it's just like what you really needed to say was just to like have someone validate you.
Yeah.
So it always comes back to just like theater, journalism, philosophy. It's always just trying to communicate something.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're trying to communicate something out, then that means that we're trying to get it validated from within. And I'm just like, okay, so that's there, and then we can do it inside of theater. We can do this like exchange of like being there for folks, being emotionally vulnerable, holding space for folks, and then communicating effectively and emotionally and empathically. I'm just like, great, that's what we're doing. And that's kind of where the therapy aspect comes along with it, is that it always comes from a place of just trying to communicate out. So it's all about that communication and then all of the barriers that we have to get there.
This is a bit of a loaded question, but obviously, with everything going on in the world right now, this time has been stressful for many of us. And obviously, this pandemic has upended the lives and careers of so many artists and entertainers. And I kind of have two questions for you. As an artist yourself, what challenges have you faced during this time? And also, have you dealt with any serious like mental health strains during this time as well?
Yes. I'm pretty fortunate because my current job it's in theater, or it's in theater arts technically, but it's a marketing job and it's digital. So I
And
think
that's
that
with a Golden Thread.
it's with Stagebridge in Oakland.
Oh, okay.
I was with Golden Thread. I was about to say Golden Bread. Golden Thread from September of last year until February of this year. So a little bit of your short stint. But I'm at Stagebridge right now, which is it's an elderly or creative aging. We're trying to like shift the term. So it's a creative aging education organization that gears all of our performance classes and performance education classes to um, elderly folks and aging folks. So it's so for that, because all of our stuff it has gone digital, all of our classes are digital. I have a lot of privilege right now in this moment. So I think that I'm able to talk about things that like other people can't talk about and other people don't have time for or space for. So it's like, and especially for theater folks who, once again, inside of the capital world of theater, which is like a big discussion right now, is like all of my friends are like out of jobs, and like everybody that I know is like out of jobs, and the if you're looking to get like a grant to like support yourself, for example, then you know if you're an actor, like it's going to be infinitely hard for you to get a grant because there's the pool is very large, and then your talent is not necessarily to like write a 5-page essay about like why you need this work. um you know, it's so, or even like a lighting designer, especially in the design community, it's like, okay, things are shifting, yes, but I'm just like, you know, I have a friend who like, you know, is in an economic situation now, but like she's a fantastically talented prop designer and scenic designer and scenic painter, but like nobody's doing that right now. So just inside of that, I see a lot of issues around like once again the economics of it and the economics of theater in specific. Of course, the economics of everything is like it's mirrored, but like a job is a job, and like people don't have jobs. So and then personally, just mentally, everything since the beginning of the pandemic was just about unearthing. It just kind of felt like, so I think that anything that I was feeling mentally, it was odd because I was like 2020, like I was setting up to kind of do a year of like mental health mental health like taking care of myself actually mentally, which I haven't fully done in the past because it's like I kind of tout a big game, especially historically, but I've never ever really made the time to like just take care of myself fully. Um, so yes, depression, anxiety, especially like, OCD, actual OCD, inside of the pandemic. And I say actual OCD because I'm just like, yeah, actual OCD is different than just like being tidy and clean,
Yeah.
obviously. But then it's like, I think that with this, there's just like such a mental strain on everybody. But then personally, I've had to like, not just like for myself, but like for everyone around me, there's just been so much emotional opening.
Hmm.
So I think for me, it's also been like shared. It's like, okay, so then I'm kind of turning to like my roommate over here who's like going through a very strong issue, and I'm like turning to my family over here, and then I kind of turn to my friends and the world, and I'm just like, so I think it's just strain as everybody's feeling,
Hmm.
um, but also I'm in a place where I'm just like that a lot of people don't have access to right now,
Yeah.
which is like I have a stable-ish job, knock on wood. Um, I have the resources to talk about what's happening inside of like my head and my heart more clearly than I ever have before. Um, and also, I'm developing like tools to combat, depression, anxiety, and getting triggered like inside of the moment. Which, once again, I've never fully had tools for that before. Um, and even if I did have tools, I didn't like practice them fully. I didn't like practice mental health like I would practice a play.
Hmm.
Um, and then that's why all of this stuff like therapy, it's really coalescing more now than ever. Because I was like, yeah, I've always like been doing it, but now it's like it's time to do it like actually for myself and not like this, inanimate character that I'm gonna play, or not for like a piece that I'm writing, or not for a show that I'm directing. It's just about me. It's just about trying to take care of myself in this moment so that I can, actively create theater or actively hold space for others or teach or do whatever.
Right.
Or just live, you know, or just live. So it's, yeah, a lot of deep depression. And I think that the other thing is, once again, like mentally preparing yourselves for these conversations,
Right.
because it's just like it's so hard to open up the door for these conversations that need to happen so that action can happen in the future.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, so how do you make sure that you don't shut yourself down? How do you make sure that you are presenting yourself not in a respectful way, but like how do you speak passionately but not emotionally derail yourself? And how, gosh, just how do you like hold all this grief, especially like if you're black or a person of color, um, or queer or trans, or a mixture of all of these things, or disabled, or differently abled, or you have a invisible disability. Um, so I think it's just, yeah, personally, if it's just thinking about a lot and holding space for a lot of people right now,
Hmm.
and then trying to balance that for myself and ask myself more than I have ever before. Um, what do you need in this moment to feel safe and feel protected and to like live to accurately fight another day,
Mm-hmm.
which are, questions that I've thought about, but I've never had tools to answer until quite recently.
I feel that very heavily. For my last question, are there any issues that you personally believe we should be paying more attention to right now?
Oh, I mean, we're kind of paying attention to a lot. I just think that the one thing that we're never quite paying attention to enough is like, I mean, we always bring it up, but it's just like we really do need to talk about intersectionality. Because like even I was like watching like a comedy special, and it was like with this black woman, and she's like incredible and hilarious, but she's like and very passionate, and she was like cisgendered and black, and I was just like, that's an experience to be a black woman or to be a black femme person. Um, and then she made this joke that was hilarious, but she was just like, gay black men are like the most confident people because they're fighting like racism on one side and homophobia on the other side. And I was just in the moment, because like how she was presenting it, I was like, yeah, that's hilarious. But then I was also like, black trans women like actually are dealing with more stuff. And so when I say intersectionality, I really have to talk about black trans people and black trans women specifically, um, in the overall discussion
Yeah.
of intersectionality. Because black trans women, and once again, like I'm not a black trans person, I'm not trying to speak for black trans people, but like they have the most obstacles when trying to live their lives. So I think that for me, it's always about that discussion in intersectionality, where I'm just like, this cisgendered black female comic, made a very simple joke, but I was just like, like being black, trans, inside of a trans identity, or on top of it, like a queer identity, potentially, or being viewed as such. Um, lack of access to like resources and like health resources, and then like a lack of access to like legal resources. And I'm just like, if a white supremacist system, or like a straight white male or a cisgendered male system, tries to eliminate black people, and tries to eliminate women, and tries to eliminate trans people or non-binary people or genderqueer people, then how are we not talking about black trans women who are traditionally at the center of like movements and like civil rights and talks about equity and equality first, and like even going back to like Stonewall, like started by surprise like black trans women. So when we talk about all of this stuff, it's easy to just make it a discussion in black white, narratives, or rich poor narratives. And I think it's harder to really see intersectionality in a real way. So I think that's kind of the thing that we talk, because like all of this stuff just seems to be fodder sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, what we're seeing this week, for example, is like federal, federal agents are descending on Portland and turning
Yeah.
it into like a riot situation. And I was just like, yeah. And there are a lot of people who are getting hurt. A lot of people who are like losing their lives, getting very injured. And then I was just like, And then there's Black trans women. And then there's Black trans women who are like facing the combination of all of this, not in like a 60-day period in a city in downtown. They're like living it. So yeah, that I think is what is.
I mean, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's, that's an issue, that I was aware of, but I did not know really, and I mean, I still don't know the full scope of it, but really you've kind of enlightened me on it a little bit more, so I appreciate that. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Freedom Community Clinic in Oakland?
Yeah, the Freedom Community Clinic in Oakland is a fantastic organization that has been providing free services for like folks of color and Black folks inside of, and by services I mean like health and alternative medicine services. I think that inside of Black communities, because of like the weight of white supremacy, we sometimes think that we don't need some health resources and we don't need mental health resources, because we were tricked into thinking that we're like as strong as a hammer, because it's like when you have Black people historically, trying to break away from the idea that they're objects and that they are strong until they're not needed anymore. I think it kind of, that mindset unfortunately seeps into into the minds of Black people, specifically African Americans, and makes us think that we don't need help and we don't need resources. And we sometimes see that sometimes with like many BIPOC groups, where it's like, oh, we see an aversion to like therapy, for example, and we see an aversion to like healthcare, especially because like Black folks just are historically and systemically like mistreated inside of healthcare systems. So it's like we either have mistrust of healthcare or a denial that we need it. And I think that Freedom Community Clinic and based in Oakland they really are changing the narrative on that, because they provide a lot of resources, and if they don't provide the resources, then they'll like connect you with somebody who can help provide resources for like health, mental health. They've been like they ran community like open clinics in different parks around Oakland, and they're continuing to do that work in the future. And I went there and like I got a consultation for like an herbalist, and I continued talking with herbalists, and I got like medicine that helped me.
That's all I have for today. So thank you so much, man, for doing this. I'm so glad you could be the first guest on this show. Thank you for your patience and letting me roll out all these questions and giving such great answers. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Once again, I will be leaving a link to the Freedom Community Clinic's website if you would like to learn more information about them or donate. I would like to thank the very generous Julius Rea for all his wonderful answers and for joining me here today. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in. Until next time, I'm James Paul Gregory, and wear a mask. Signing off.